Hi, I'm Don Coughlin. We as a nation conduct foreign relations and trade with countries throughout the world. The European Union, Central South America, and the Far East. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, has opened up our markets to countries south of our border and opened up a flow of trade between less fortunate countries and ourselves over the past 10 years. However, one of our closest neighbors is completely blocked off. We have very little foreign relations with them and have very little trade. Basically, we've blockaded them since the 1960s. That country is Cuba. The United States policy towards Cuba and its trade policy or embargo that we've employed since the 1960s have utterly failed to meet their goal. The policy is antiquated as far as foreign relations goes and a complete failure as far as its trade embargo. Our foreign policy towards Cuba is completely different than any other communist country that we've dealt with over the long term. Our foreign policy basically with Cuba current policy began back in the 1960s during the Cuban Missile Crisis and the takeover of the Castro regime in Cuba. However, our trade policy with them has probably hurt even more. Our trade policy has done nothing to meet its goal of democracy for the Cuban people. America has employed a foreign policy towards Cuba much different, like I said, than any other foreign country communist country that we've dealt with. During the Cold War, we cut off diplomacy with the Castro government, yet, however, we still talk to the Soviet Union and other communist bloc countries. Even in the 1970s, we opened up foreign relations with China, another communist country. Our policy towards the Cuban people itself is appalling. But they are not offered asylum if they come to our country. They are sent back to Cuba. Basically, our policy, for lack of a better term, is that of a leper colony, not a nation needing a hand to raise itself up. Also, as far as immigration and naturalization and travel to and from Cuba, Americans are completely blocked from going to Cuba. At one time, we were allowed to go from another country, basically go to Mexico, then go to Cuba or whatever. However, we are completely blocked from any travel into Cuba. This, again, is not on the same line as what was with the former communist Soviet Union, Eastern Bloc nations, even China of today, which is still a communist country. I mean, all you have to do is just think back a few months to the 2008 Olympics. How many Americans do you think traveled to communist China? We have travel to there, but we can't travel 90 miles from our country to another country. Why? Is Cuba that much more of a dangerous communist country? I don't know. President Kennedy imposed a trade embargo on Cuba in September 1962. The Cuban Democracy Act, as it's known, had one sole purpose: to bring democracy to the Cuban people. That has utterly failed. Obviously, and it's still a communist country. It's 40 years. Basically, the only things that they can get from us now is medical supplies. That is the only thing that was opened up by President Clinton. However, again, if you look at the policy with foreign communist countries, it doesn't stand up. How many of us can remember back to the late 80s when Russia was still a communist country before the Berlin Wall came down, and remember seeing McDonald's in downtown Moscow? Is democracy a Big Mac with large fries and a soda? I don't know. But it's much more than what Cuba has had. All American companies are barred from having any dealings or operating within the confines of Cuba itself. And foreign trade, again, is cut off. Today, communist China, a huge nation, huge economic giant of a nation, and that communist, we're allowed to, has most favored nation status when it comes to trade. However, it is illegal to have a Cuban cigar. I'm not sure. Maybe the tobacco companies have something to do with this, but I'm not sure. But again, it doesn't make sense. Let's face it, folks, the Cold War has ended. American foreign policy towards the Castro regime remains a remnant of that Cold War. Fidel Castro is no more a threat to the United States than Nikita Khrushchev or Joseph Stalin is anymore. The American trade deficit continues to grow, but yet we do nothing to open up that lucrative market. What we need to do is we need to get in there. What you need to do is let our next president know. Our Congress and our Senate over the last few years have tried to open that door twice, and both times it's been closed by our presidency. We need to open that door. You need to open that door. Let our next president know that Cuba needs to be welcomed back in. We need to start trade, and we need to start diplomatic talks with them. Thank you.